Lien began to wonder whether she could truly stay here and be accepted. On her way home, she thought about Zhang Yi's offer. Should she discuss it with her students? When her students saw the resources she had, they were overjoyed and immediately swarmed the food like zombies. Feeling slightly relieved, Lien wanted to know how they had fared on their first day of fishing in the river. One of the students said that working at the base had been pure suffering, but now they could finally enjoy fresh air and freedom. However, no one wanted to work outside in the cold. They had only managed to catch 3 fish. Lien wasn't surprised by the outcome. The young men were dissatisfied with the meager amount of food and wanted more, but one of them, who was more rational, reminded the group that this food came from Lien, who had received it from Zhang Yi. They needed to learn to find their own food with their own hands. One of the students asked Lien if she could request permission for all of them to stay in her house. They could eat less and help with the chores if necessary. The other students insisted, if Karen and Shur could stay, why couldn't they? Lien gave them a serious look and explained that they were not like those 2 girls. Karen and Shur possessed extraordinary intellectual abilities that none of them could match. Despite hearing this, the selfish students still pressured Lien to try harder to find a way for them to leave. At that moment, Lien became certain she could not discuss Zhang Yi's offer with them just yet. 3 days later, Zhang Yi and his followers were preparing to head to the Excision base. Karen listed the necessary materials they needed to collect. After discussing their priorities, they set off toward their destination. On the way, Chunlei mentioned that the mutant cats were starting to look different, they no longer resembled the same creatures. Zhang Yi understood what he meant, though the others did not. The mutant cats had the same ability to absorb power from other mutants, making them far stronger now. Zhang Yi was eager to see these monsters in action. Not long after, Shinsen contacted Zhang Yi and asked if he had arrived at the ruins yet because she had important information to share. Zhang Yi told her to go ahead and speak. Shinsen had discovered that Tianhai City had 4 military bases scattered across different areas. Each of these bases controlled a separate region. They had been built many years ago and reinforced even further after the disaster. These bases were just as strong as the Shursan base, and all of them were underground, fully stocked with weapons and war preparations. Zhang Yi replied that at least they now knew how many bases remained in the city. Although he was aware that these bases were relatively far from their home, he couldn't be sure that they wouldn't try to expand their territory and eventually reach them. However, before Zhang Yi could dwell on the thought, Shinsen interrupted him, revealing that there was another special force outside of those 3 bases. Very little information was available about them, except that they had a large number of members. Zhang Yi thanked Shinsen for the crucial intel, which pleased her. She assured him that she would continue to gather more information for him. For Zhang Yi, this was exactly what he had hoped for. After the death of 90% of Tianhai's population, there should have been more than enough resources left for the remaining 10%. Because of that, he was confident that there wouldn't be any conflicts over exploiting the city's food supplies. Even though the future was uncertain, his uncle knew that the worst-case scenario always had a way of happening. Still, Zhang Yi was sure that no matter which group they encountered, the 4 people in his vehicle could obliterate any army. Arrival at Shushan base. Upon reaching the Shushan base, they rushed toward their target. Near the base, 2 different groups were arguing. It was clear that they belonged to separate bases, as they were in the middle of a heated dispute. They agreed on one thing, however: the entrance to the base was completely blocked. They hadn't expected Chenyuan to provoke the neighboring city and end up getting destroyed by missiles. One of the leaders commented that Chenyuan had always been too arrogant, and in the end, that arrogance had led to its downfall. A group led by a red-haired man seemed frustrated. Their journey had been in vain since they couldn't enter the base. Clearing all the rubble blocking the entrance would require immense effort, and they simply weren't capable of doing it now. However, one of the base leaders was confident there had to be a massive amount of resources left inside, and they would undoubtedly be valuable to them. The red-haired man stated that they could use mutant abilities to clear the path, but how would they transport all the materials back to their base? Their base was located 200 kilometers away from here. When asked if they could transport the resources, the red-haired man replied that they were in the same situation. He had only come here to assess the condition of Shushan base, and realizing that everyone inside was already dead was the best news for him. Even if they couldn't take the resources, they were now competing to claim control over the area. Zhang Yi and his team watched from a distance. His uncle quickly recognized that these people must be from the other bases Shinsen had mentioned earlier. Zhang Yi instructed his team to follow him and remain silent. Then, Zhang Yi approached the 2 groups. The emblem on his uniform came from a fake Shursan base uniform, crafted by Karen. The people here believed that everyone from Shursan base was dead, so they were shocked to see him. The red-haired man immediately declared that he was only there to gather information. Since he had already obtained what he needed, he would be leaving soon. In his mind, the representative of King Chang Base believed that there was no point in engaging in a conflict over something they couldn't even take. However, unlike the first group, the representative from Choyu Base was more aggressive. He argued that he did not believe Zhang Yi's team were actual survivors from Shirshan Base. Zhang Yi, on the other hand, ignored the accusation and simply ordered those who had gathered the information they needed to return to their territories. He and his team had no intention of starting a conflict. But suddenly, the man shouted for them to wait. He declared that they didn't understand the situation. The soldier beside him was a powerful mutant and would be the new ruler of this place. Chun was shocked to see another mutant. The soldier displayed his strength, stating that he was used to crushing enemies like ants. After issuing this threat and demonstration of absolute power, he was confident that they wouldn't dare fight back. Zhang Yi calmly stated that he had no intention of causing trouble, but since it was now unavoidable, he decided to reveal the true extent of his power. Suddenly, the mutant fire leader's head was sent flying, and the mutant cat instantly grew larger, devouring 2 nearby soldiers in a flash. However, the cat immediately spat them out, finding their taste disgusting. It didn't eat trash. Zhang Yi attempted to absorb the soldier's power, but it turned out that he was merely a newly awakened mutant, far too weak to increase Zhang Yi's strength. Chun then remarked that these arrogant young men always thought they were invincible as soon as they discovered their abilities. After storing the bodies, Zhang Yi noted that Choyu Base had never faced a real battle, and its members were far too weak. Entering Shirshan Base. They then proceeded to enter Shirshan Base to complete their mission. Using the incredible power of his dimensional space, Zhang Yi cleared the corridors so they could enter. There seemed to be no immediate danger, so the mutant cat took the lead. The first room they entered was in complete chaos. They reached the first gate, and Chun suddenly mentioned that he could feel an eerie chill in this place. Zhang Yi reassured him, saying, "There's nothing to fear, neither the living nor the dead." They continued deeper into the base until they arrived at a door labeled Armory. When they opened it, they were shocked. Inside, the room contained the most powerful military equipment imaginable, including helicopters and RPG missiles. Zhang Yi declared that this must have been the weapons depot for the entire city, and it had existed long before the apocalypse. In Chun's eyes, these weapons were useless in a world covered in snow and ice. However, Zhang Yi countered that if these weapons were truly useless, Ling Feng would not have used them to attack their home. But his real goal was to use the weapons from the vehicles. His uncle's eyes lit up with interest as he examined the weapons. Zhang Yi collected everything into his storage space, it seemed to be limitless. He then told his uncle to pick what he wanted, reminding him that these weapons were for defense, not for playing around. Exploring further. Moving to another area, they found the path blocked by rubble. Zhang Yi's uncle used his abilities to clear the way. As they continued, they discovered computers and servers belonging to the base. Zhang Yi stated that these computers might contain useful data for Shinsen, so he stored them away. Chunlei, who had been cautious, was suddenly startled by cockroaches crawling from the debris. Zhang Yi smirked and explained that this place was likely used to create protein for the workers. Even though it was a horrifying realization, Zhang Yi mocked Chun for being scared like a woman. Observing the equipment used to convert people into food, Zhang Yi wondered if he should bring it back to Karen. Even though he found it cruel, he understood that everything had its use, so he decided to take it along. They continued walking through various locations inside the underground base. After some time, the mutant cat began to feel uneasy. They didn't know where the potential threat was coming from, but Zhang Yi had a strange feeling, as if they were being watched from the shadows. The warehouse. After some time, they arrived at a warehouse. The door was so strong that even Pamanu, using his full strength, could not break it down. Zhang Yi stepped forward and attempted to open it the traditional way. He reminded the others not to underestimate technology just because they had superpowers. Then, Zhang Yi signaled for Pamanu to proceed. After a great deal of effort, they finally managed to open the warehouse door. Inside was a massive hall filled with dozens of crates, immediately drawing their attention. Pamanu pointed toward a curtain at the far end of the room. When they pulled it aside, they discovered resources that initially seemed unremarkable. However, Zhang Yi was confident that Ken could use them to build something useful. With a smirk, he stole everything. The storage room. Another room nearby caught Zhang Yi's attention. Inside, they found a stockpile of food that the base had gathered from their various missions. Pamanu thought that Zhang Yi should take most of it, as it was too much for them to eat alone. Zhang Yi laughed and said, "I already have enough food to last a lifetime, and I will always share with my allies." After looting everything they needed, they sealed off the base entrance. Besides using heavy stones, which Chunlei reinforced, he also piled up snow and created an ice barrier. Then, they headed home in their vehicle. Back at home. Once they arrived home, Zhang Yi found out that Lien had gone for his martial arts training session with him. However, he had not yet returned from his mission. Zuokir informed him about this and relayed a message from Zhang Yi himself, to cancel today's lesson. Lien was shocked to hear this. He knew that this meant he would return empty-handed, without food for his hungry students. Zuokir then asked if Lien was hungry. Although Lien was starving, he refused to eat and decided to come back tomorrow instead. Zuokir felt bad that Lien had come all this way for nothing. But Lien reassured him, saying, "Don't worry. The class schedule is set by the students." Then, the young woman left in embarrassment. Just then, Shinsen appeared and commented, "This must be the way of martial artists." Zuokir sighed and remarked that Lien should have at least taken food for himself. However, Shinsen firmly disagreed, saying, "That would have been even worse for Lien." Lien's former students were selfish and unworthy, constantly fighting over small portions of food. That was why Lien chose not to bring them anything. Zuokir then wondered, did Zhang Yi do this on purpose? Did he intentionally forget to inform Lien that he would be away, making him come here expecting to bring food to his students, only to return empty-handed? Did he do it so that Lien would finally realize the truth about his students? The crazy girl in the wheelchair immediately agreed, saying, "That's exactly what happened. Zhang Yi is amazing for coming up with such a brilliant plan." Shin was fascinated by Zhang Yi's cunning, while Zuokir simply nodded in agreement, saying that this was exactly something her fiancé would do. Lien's realization. On the way home, Zhang Yi suddenly remembered that he had forgotten to tell Lien he would be gone today. Meanwhile, when Lien returned to the village, he noticed the villagers working hard. Even the children were helping. This made him think about his own martial arts students, who simply sat around, waiting for him to bring them food. At that moment, he was impressed by the villagers and realized Zhang Yi had been right. Letting his students fend for themselves, even a little, was necessary. When he returned to his students, they immediately ran toward him, asking, "Where's today's food?" Lien replied, "Zhang Yi isn't home, so there's no food today. You'll have to go out and catch fish." The students grumbled in frustration, shouting, "If Zhang Yi isn't home, he should at least leave some food for us." Lien wanted them to stop blaming others and start finding their own food. But they argued back. "We're not fishermen. Our hands are injured." Another student complained. "This is all because of Shinsen and Karen. They were our classmates for years, and now they live comfortably while ignoring us." Soon, everyone agreed that the girls had always been the real villains. Lien was shocked by their accusations. These were the same girls who had nearly died because of them, and yet they were still being blamed. He became furious as he listened to their selfish remarks. Finally, he shouted at them to be quiet. He had an announcement to make. "The decision," Lien declared. "From now on, I will live in the bunker with Ken and Shinli." He had decided that he could no longer spoil these people. The students cheered, thinking this meant he would take them with him. But Lien quickly shattered their hopes. This was not what they thought. They would all stay here and learn to survive on their own. Zhang Yi had promised to provide food for 10 people daily, but only for martial arts training. Lien would personally deliver this food to them, but that was all. Even though Lien knew he was giving up his own food, his ungrateful students still rebelled, refusing to accept the situation. They even called him selfish for making this decision. Lien, however, was done listening to his spoiled students. Ignoring their protests, he turned away and walked toward his new home. After a while, Lien left the environment filled with shouting and disgusting selfishness. Now, he was in a warm place and welcomed with kindness. Zuokir took him to meet the students. Lien then spoke with the two girls and heard from Karen that life here was very enjoyable. The cheerful girl said that she had been happier in the past few days than in her entire previous life. Lien was unsure whether he could admit it to himself, but he also wanted to leave those people behind and live for himself. His desire was growing, and he could no longer deny it. As a result, Lien started to cry, and they shared their feelings together. After that, Lien asked Karen and Ken to speak with Zhang Yi on his behalf. Ken was certain that Zhang Yi would not refuse Lien because of his great abilities. However, Ken reminded him that there was one absolute rule in the bunker: anyone who joined must be ready to follow his orders. Lien felt embarrassed and asked what exactly that meant. Did everyone in this place have to obey all orders without question? He was ashamed and hoped that with 4 women already living in the house, Zhang Yi did not intend to add him as the 5th member of his room. Shinsen told Lien that he was definitely mistaken. Since Karen and she arrived here, Zhang Yi had never shown any inappropriate behavior toward them. The one with impure thoughts was Lien himself. So, Shinsen explained that their big brother was not a depraved predator. On the contrary, he was an honorable man, and all he needed from them was their strength. If that was the case, Lien declared that he was ready to follow all orders. A few moments later, a vehicle approached the bunker. Before long, Shinsen greeted Zhang Yi at the front door. He was surely curious about why Lien was there at that moment. So, Shinsen explained the situation and why the woman was now in the bunker. The two of them discussed how Zhang Yi's plan had worked perfectly. Lien was furious with his students and had decided to request to stay in the bunker. Now, they just had to wait for him to formally ask and accept the terms. Zhang Yi then asked the men to wait in another room because he had something important to discuss with Lien. Karen served drinks for them, and then the three of them began their meeting. Lien felt embarrassed because he didn't know Zhang Yi's real intentions in having him stay in the group. Because of that, Shinsen started acting and asked if Lien could stay with them in this house. Zhang Yi said that it didn't make sense. Lien had students to take care of. He wouldn't want to stay here, right? It wasn't that Zhang Yi was against Lien staying, but Lien remembered that Zhang Yi had only invited him once. After he refused, saying he had to take care of his students, Zhang Yi never asked again. Now, with a determined gaze, the woman thought that if she could be useful, she might get a second chance to stay here. Karen served a special drink to her leader and then gave her opinion. She said that the students were only taking advantage of Lien's kindness and did not deserve his dedication. Lien then explained that Zhang Yi should let him help his students grow and learn to survive out there. He would follow all the rules and orders of this place. He would do any job and meet any demands. Zhang Yi said that he accepted Lien staying here, but he was not sure if Lien would truly follow all the necessary orders. Lien started trembling and said that he would obey. However, there were limits he could not cross. Zhang Yi then said that Lien was a kind and sincere woman. That was a good quality, but at the same time, it was also a weakness. One day, there might be a need to take an innocent life to protect the base and its people. Would Lien be willing to do it? Lien realized that such a situation could happen. He said that if it was necessary, he would do it. But if it was just to satisfy someone's evil desires, he would not. Shinsen, a peace lover, agreed. Their big brother did not kill unless provoked. Lien also agreed with that but emphasized that he would never harm those close to him. Zhang Yi smiled and said that was obvious. Of course, he would not be so cruel as to ask them to kill their loved ones. That was his rule for everyone. However, with a dark expression, Zhang Yi told himself that such matters were his responsibility alone. Zhang Yi also believed that in a post-apocalyptic world, deaths due to accidents were normal. Furthermore, he was certain that his women would support him in eliminating those who posed a threat. They sealed the deal with a handshake, making Lien officially part of Zhang Yi's family. Lien felt relieved, knowing that he could still help his ungrateful students while staying in this comfortable place. Shinsen knew that her teacher was naive. Soon, those foolish students would bring destruction upon themselves. Zwakir and Yang Mai went to see the new recruit and announced that they would throw a party to celebrate his joining the team. Yang Mai said that if Lien had a favorite food, he could request it. With so much excitement, Lien was overwhelmed by feelings he couldn't explain. However, the truth was that the two leading women now realized there was another woman in Zhang Yi's harem. Zhang Yi warned that there would be a meeting with the other members, and Lien must attend. He explained that it was a war meeting, where urgent matters would be decided. This didn't mean there would be a new war. However, Zhang Yi explained that they had discovered another military base, and those people were clearly their enemies. Lien understood that this was bound to happen. With the fall of a powerful base, a power vacuum was created, and others would definitely try to seize control of the territory. Coincidentally, Shinsen had new information to share about the Shirshan base. Zhang Yi gathered the whole team, and after that, he would share the new information with everyone. At the moment, they were very comfortable with everything. However, new enemies were approaching, and another confrontation was inevitable. Shinsen then revealed the existence of 3 other strong bases, shocking those who were unaware of them. After some time, they began discussing the situation. The first of the 4 major locations they knew of was Yangshan Base. This area was rich in oil and fuel. The leader of this base, Xiaohong Lien, had fire abilities, while her assistant, Zuj King Tuang, had wind powers. Next was Chaoyu Base, which controlled all the ships in the city. Zhang Yi was curious whether sailing was still possible in such weather. Shinsen explained that only the surface layer of the ocean was frozen. Since it was impossible for the entire sea and ocean to freeze completely, ships could still be used. Zhang Yi wondered if, since the sea wasn't entirely frozen, anyone with a boat could take advantage of it for fishing. Shinsen confirmed that this was true, and this base had great potential in seafood production. However, she further explained that boats required a lot of fuel, so people from this area had to come to the city to get more supplies. Zhang Yi realized that the soldiers he had killed before had likely come from this base. Lastly, there was Kingpo base, ruled by Sing Tian, who had a very strange ability. He could enhance the strength of those around him. However, his face was unknown, and very little information was available about his territory. Shinsen felt slightly pessimistic, stating that in this apocalyptic era, large factions rarely clashed openly or revealed their special abilities. Zhang Yi felt that this was already predictable, thinking to himself that these people would certainly not reveal their powers unless absolutely necessary. This happened because as long as there was a struggle for power and resources in Tanhai, the leaders of the bases would be extremely cautious not to be overthrown. Shinsen continued explaining that each base had its own characteristics. What distinguished the Shirshan base was the great strength of its army. The Yongsan base had energy resources, the Chaoyu base controlled maritime transportation, and the Kingsing base focused on metal production. The other bases did not have large armies, only individuals with special abilities. Among them, the Shirshan base, which they had defeated, was the strongest of all. After finishing her explanation, Shinsen noticed that everyone felt relieved because the threats posed by these enemies were not greater than those they had already faced. Even Zhang Yi, who was usually cautious, began to feel more relaxed. However, Lien was still curious about the fourth force that Shinsen had mentioned. It turned out that Shinsen had only mentioned 3. The girl in the wheelchair then explained that there was a group called the Snow Worshippers. The leader of this group had the ability to turn people into mutants. The sect leader claimed to be Bai, the reincarnation of ice, and insisted that everyone must join him to be saved because he was the chosen one. The influence of this group was growing rapidly, to the point where the Shirshan base considered them a threat. Zhang Yi began to think about the potential rise of a religious army whose entire members were mutants, which would undoubtedly be a major problem. He wanted to hear the opinions of others on this matter, but no one immediately responded. Finally, Zhang Yi asked Pamanu, a military veteran. The veteran said that they must always be prepared to face the greatest danger. The first step was to build the strongest possible defense. Pamanu suggested that they use the weapons they had obtained to prepare for any attacks. Zhang Yi agreed that they should focus on building a solid defense. Chunlei, who was also concerned, supported the idea of focusing on fortifications. Zhang Yi then asked for Karen's opinion, and she expressed that they needed to continue searching for stronger building materials for their defense. If they left now while the other territories had not yet advanced, they would not encounter enemies from other bases. Zhang Yi agreed with Karen's view that they needed to leave immediately to gather more materials. Shinsen wanted to hear her teacher's opinion, as he seemed very anxious. Shinsen told her teacher not to panic and took the Shirshan base as an example. Even though their strongest base was here, they couldn't explore and control the entire territory. Because of this, the other bases couldn't expand their territories either or risk losing their forces since they had fewer soldiers. Based on this, they still had a lot of time to explore and gather more resources available in the city. Lien explained that building defenses was important, but they had to use this time to collect more resources first. Chunlei asked if her teacher agreed, and Lien replied that she was worried about her students' safety if an attack occurred. Zhang Yi thought to himself that if an attack did happen, the village where Lien's students lived would be the first place to be destroyed. Lien asked if her students could help in building defenses. However, Zhang Yi then questioned what they could contribute if they couldn't even fish in a place where fish were the only available resource. This was a reality that even Lien herself couldn't deny. To comfort their new member, Zhang Yi said that if something happened, he would find a solution. He added that if danger arose, he would allow Lien's students to stay in the shelter temporarily. Everyone who heard this was stunned. They were once not even friends, but now Lien was part of the family. If she wanted to help her students, then he would protect them. These words moved Lien to tears. Zhang Yi told her that she didn't need to thank him, as it was the least he could do. Lien then realized that all this time, she had misinterpreted everything. Zhang Yi was a good person, even though he might seem ruthless when faced with threats from outsiders. Zhang Yi then decided that their priority was to build defenses. Meanwhile, he and Karen would go search for the special materials needed for construction. After the meeting, Yokier announced that Lien's welcome dinner was ready. Shinsen smiled, seeing her teacher so excited. Lien devoured the meal so eagerly that her stomach couldn't handle much food. Yokier commented that she had been eating poorly, so her stomach couldn't handle too much meat. In the end, Lien was taken to rest because she had eaten too much. This good life felt like heaven to the teacher. After dinner, Zhang Yi called Karen and asked her to come closer. He noticed that Karen didn't seem happy during the meeting. Karen said it was nothing, but Zhang Yi pinched her head lightly and told her not to hide anything from him because now they were family. Karen gathered her courage and asked why Zhang Yi was willing to accept those wicked students. He must have known how they had treated Shinsen and her at the academy. Zhang Yi then calmed Karen down and explained that this was part of his plan. Before any attack occurred, those devils would gather and starve to death. Karen's eyes lit up, realizing that her brother was very clever and never disappointed her. Zhang Yi then said that this must remain a secret, and they must not discuss it at home. Karen now looked happier than ever and went to retrieve the list of materials needed for construction. Zhang Yi knew that he could only control his group members for now. The only thing left was to see how their enemies would act. The next day, Karen showed the location where she wanted the materials to be placed. Zhang Yi helped move the materials to the designated location, while Liang cut them into the desired shapes. Pamanu lifted the beams and metal walls. They worked hard together. From a distance in the village, two people were whispering inside an empty house. Realizing the opportunity, they were delighted. However, someone was watching them curiously, wondering what they were up to. What were they planning? And what did they want? As they drew closer, the mystery deepened. She was a poor girl. Lian immediately ran toward the house to see what was happening inside. The student was locking the door as best as he could. The girl was one of the village residents, and they were making a deal. The student would give her food, and in return, she would help him with certain things that she understood. As the room's temperature started to rise, Lian arrived outside and heard voices from within. She broke down the door and, upon entering, saw the two helping each other. The sight made her furious. The student argued that he was already an adult and had his own needs, so Lian should understand what was happening. He insisted that he wasn't forcing anyone into this, and the girl agreed that it was true. Lian then took the food that had been given to them and crushed it in her hands. Was this what she had fought so hard for, to feed them? The boy, now angry, shouted that Lian only needed to find them food and not interfere in their personal matters. Despite her rage, Lian's student asked her to leave and not disturb them. Eventually, Lian relented and walked out of the room. Zhang Yi was already waiting outside and remarked that reality could be cruel. Lian felt confused and asked if Zhang Yi thought she was being naive. She felt sad and started to believe that maybe she truly was. Zhang Yi reassured her that he wasn't judging her, even though he disagreed with what had happened. His words only deepened Lian's sadness, and she said she needed some time alone. Chun Yang, curious about what had happened, asked Zhang Yi, who then explained Lian's feelings. Upon hearing this, Chun was shocked. Lian locked herself in her room, reflecting on how she had acted foolishly all this time. Everything she had done now felt meaningless. Before long, Zhang Yi knocked on the door and asked if she was all right. Lian responded that she just needed some time and would return to work soon. However, Zhang Yi stated that nothing was more important than her well-being. He had come because he was worried about her. Hearing that he was concerned made Lian's cheeks flush. Zhang Yi then asked if he could come in to talk, and Lian allowed it. He sat on the bed and told her that he understood this was a heavy blow, but he hoped she could rise above it and move forward. There was still a long road ahead. He added that if Lian ever had any problems in the future, she could always talk to him, he would always be there to listen. Lian then asked if Zhang Yi thought she was a fool beyond saving. With a sincere smile, Zhang Yi admitted that she was a little naive but that he understood why she had placed so much hope in those people. Opening up, Lian shared her past. She had trained in martial arts since childhood, dedicating her entire life to it. She had once dreamed of becoming a TV star or someone important, but being a woman had always been an obstacle to her standing out. One day, she chose to leave martial arts behind and become a personal bodyguard. She recalled that it was the most glorious time of her life. Years later, she became famous for her work and was eventually recruited by the academy to serve as a physical education teacher while also protecting wealthy and noble students. Lian became sorrowful as she explained that all of her happiness was now just a memory. When the apocalypse came, she lost everything, and the only thing left was her responsibility to protect the students. That duty was the only thing that kept her going. Zhang Yi then told her that she had burdened herself too much. Furthermore, she was no longer alone. Now, she had friends who could be her family. Everyone in their shelter was different from the students she had protected before. Zhang Yi took Lian's hand and told her that she needed new motivation. He suggested that she could make him her new motivation. Hearing those words, Lian felt even more embarrassed, and her face grew hot. She quickly pulled her hand away and admitted that she was feeling a little better. However, she also confessed that she was disappointed in the student's lack of growth and maturity. Then, she stood up and left the room, leaving Zhang Yi to reflect. Shortly after, Zhang Yi found Shinsen in the living room. Shinsen asked if Zhang Yi had devoured his teacher in her room. Zhang Yi simply replied that he wasn't interested in his teacher's body. Shinsen refused to believe him and insisted that Lien was very beautiful. Zhang Yi acknowledged that Lien was indeed beautiful but also incredibly troublesome. Then, Zhang Yi whispered into Shinsen's ear, saying that at least now, Lien would no longer see the students the same way she did before. Zhang Yi proceeded to recount what he had witnessed in the cabin regarding the incident with one of her students. After hearing the story, Shinsen declared that they were truly disgusting. Zhang Yi then suggested that the best course of action was to convince Lien to leave those people behind, after which he could eliminate them all without hesitation. Shinsen wholeheartedly supported this idea and offered to help. These events left Zhang Yi feeling very satisfied. Now, he was ready to search for materials. Manhwa wanted to assist, but Zhang Yi replied that only a small mutant cat was needed for the task. Karen eagerly awaited orders from her commander. Zhang Yi playfully pinched Karen's nose and told her she was both sweet and mischievous. Karen felt that she looked beautiful in her uniform, and Zhang Yi agreed, making her blush. Then, Zhang Yi handed her a weapon for self-defense and asked if she knew how to use it. Ken nodded, and they prepared to continue their mission. Along the way, Ken wanted to know what had happened with Lien. He then asked why Ken hated the other students so much. Ken replied that he didn't want those people near him, he didn't even want to live close to them or see them from a distance. Zhang stated that he also disliked that type of person and assured Ken that soon, they would stop bothering him. They only let them into the base in case of an attack, merely to satisfy Lien. But before that, they had to make Lien give up on her desire to protect those people. Ken then said that Lien had a very soft heart, so much so that she might end up bringing those people into the shelter even if she didn't want to. Zhang replied that now everything depended on Karen and Shin. He assured Karen that Lien cared more about the two of them than she did about the other students. With enthusiasm, Ken asked if he and Shin needed to win Lien's heart. Zhang nodded, saying that if they put in the effort, they could take up all the space in their teacher's heart and drive the students out. As they approached the factory, they noticed a group of vehicles ahead. Zhang Yi observed them through binoculars and saw that the cars were modified to travel on snow, equipped with weapons mounted on their roofs. Karen, curious about what he saw, took a look for herself. Zhang Yi analyzed the situation, realizing that facing them without knowing their full capabilities or who they were could be dangerous. While he was thinking, Karen pointed out that the vehicles were off-road cars modified for snow travel, making their performance very poor. She explained that they could only go about 20 kilometers per hour and consumed 5 times more fuel than a normal vehicle due to their weight. This information surprised Zhang Yi, and he asked if she was certain. Karen confirmed it was true. However, Zhang Yi quickly realized that in times like these, fuel was incredibly scarce. If they had come this far using such inefficient vehicles, it meant they were running dangerously low on fuel. Zhang Yi suspected that they came from the Xing base. Karen asked why they would come from there, given that the Xing base was very far from this location. Zhang Yi replied that a battle was likely to break out, so Karen needed to be prepared. Zhang Yi then approached the group of vehicles, and soon enough, they noticed his presence. He instructed Karen to remain inside the car while he stepped out with his hands raised, declaring that he came in peace and was not a threat. The men did not attack. When they saw the emblem on his uniform, they recognized it as the insignia of the Shirshan base, which had already been destroyed. They whispered among themselves, wondering how someone could have survived in such a place. One of them even commented that Zhang Yi had a nice uniform, so he must have held a high rank. Another suggested that if Zhang Yi had managed to survive, he must have incredible strength, as he showed no fear despite being surrounded by armed enemies. Hearing this, one of the men said that Zhang Yi should speak to their captain when he returned and that he could wait there. Zhang Yi agreed to the suggestion. Not long after, he saw some of them entering a warehouse through the roof, just as he would have done, descending with ropes from the ceiling. Then, a man who appeared to be the captain of the group emerged. Zhang Yi immediately realized that if this man wasn't a mutant, then he must be incredibly strong. The captain approached Zhang Yi and asked if he was truly a member of the Shirshan base. Zhang Yi introduced himself as the captain of the Shirshan Special Operations Team. Hearing this, the man nodded, saying that it explained why Zhang Yi had the courage to come alone and speak with them. The captain then firmly asked what Zhang Yi's real purpose was in coming here. Did he intend to drive them all away? He explained that Shirshan base had already been destroyed and that they were no longer strong enough to fight the Xing base. He warned Zhang Yi not to have any reckless ideas. However, Zhang Yi calmly responded that this base was merely a material production factory. If the Xing base wanted resources, they were free to take as much as they wanted. But Zhang Yi also stated that he needed to take some supplies as well, as this territory still belonged to his base. The rival captain agreed to Zhang Yi's request and gave him 30 minutes to collect what he needed. Zhang Yi was satisfied with the deal they had made. Zhang Yi then asked Karen to follow him. Karen felt embarrassed because of how close she was to Zhang Yi, but she quickly regained focus and asked if it was safe to leave their car unattended. Zhang Yi reassured her that it was fine, but the real reason was that he didn't want to reveal his strength in front of others. They continued their journey toward the factory. As they were occupied, Captain Gowan suddenly drew his weapon and fired at Zhang Yi. However, the mutant cat immediately shielded them. It swiftly transformed into a giant form and blocked all the bullets. Even though the soldiers were terrified of the monstrous creature, they did not stop firing. The captain ordered his troops to aim for its eyes. As the gunfire focused on the mutant cat's face, the creature attacked the soldiers. In an instant, it managed to grab the first of its prey. The remaining soldiers injected themselves with a special serum, entering a combat mode that made them grow larger and more muscular. Zhang Yi realized that this was a substance used to enhance their combat abilities. With that, the mutant cat fought fiercely against 3 enhanced soldiers. They managed to hold their ground against the giant beast. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi and Karen observed the battle. Suddenly, someone sneaked up behind them and fired from behind. Zhang Yi reacted quickly, turning around and blocking the attack with a portal. Captain Gowan now realized that Zhang Yi was a mutant. After being attacked, Zhang Yi no longer hid his power and decided to go on the offensive. He fired several bullets at his enemies and declared that this would be the end for them. Gowan ordered his troops to split up, not expecting that one of their enemies' new abilities was the power to curve bullets. Despite scattering, each soldier was struck in the head, none could evade the attack, not even the captain himself. Seeing all of this, Karen was impressed and said, "Big brother looks so handsome in battle." After eliminating them all, the mutant cat spat out the remains, as they had no energy worth absorbing and tasted terrible. Zhang Yi remarked that although he tried to be peaceful, they had forced him to use violence. These greedy people attacked first, and they weren't even mutants. So they dug their own graves, he said. Karen couldn't help but exclaim how incredible Zhang Yi was, as they couldn't even lay a finger on him. After examining the bodies, Zhang Yi realized that he could now consider himself a highly skilled and experienced fighter. He was also curious about the serum they had used, a drug from the Xing base, something valuable for Zhou to research. If analyzed properly, it could prove useful in life-threatening situations. Additionally, he took the enemy's communication device and gained access to the Xing base's communication system. This was a precautionary measure. Zhang Yi explained to Karen that the base would not send reinforcements because they had lost contact with this group. The Xing base was 200 kilometers away from here, and they would likely abandon their men. Zhang Yi then stored all the corpses and vehicles in his dimensional space. Even if the Xing base sent a search team, they would never find out where their squad had disappeared. Now, they needed to quickly gather the necessary supplies and fortify their defenses. They had to prepare for the possibility of future war. He ordered the mutant cat to create an opening so they could enter. The giant feline shifted its form, smashing through the wall with its massive body, creating a hole large enough for them to pass through. They descended into the factory using ropes. Karen pointed out the items she wanted, and Zhang Yi stored them in his inventory. After collecting everything they needed, they returned to their vehicle and headed home. On the way, Zhang Yi sighed and said, "The war game will begin again." He then started planning his next move. Zhang Yi warned Ken not to tell anyone about their encounter with the Xing base. Confused, Ken asked why. Zhang Yi explained that this was something only they needed to know for now. He would ensure that no one left the base recklessly, but he also didn't want anyone else to interfere. Their focus should be solely on strengthening their defenses. In the end, everything would be secure. Zhang Yi knew exactly what he was doing, and Master Lien would be pleased to hear it. He believed that now, the students in their base were safer than ever before. Zhang Yi said that for now, there was no danger, but they had to focus on expanding their defense and remain vigilant. Zhang Yi then approached Lien and said that he didn't mind if the students came to this place if there was danger. However, he also said that it would be unfair to Xin and Karen if they had to live with those students in the same place. Lien had to remember what they had done to those 2 girls in the past. These words made Lien sad because he knew that Zhang Yi was right. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi signaled Karen to leave. Karen approached and asked, confused, why Lien wanted to bring those students to live near them. Didn't Lien's teacher remember how cruel they were to Karen and Xin during school? These words made Lien admit that he indeed remembered everything, and he actually wanted those students to survive far away from them. However, Lien couldn't deny that he still cared about those people. Strategically, Zhang Yi intervened in the conversation, reminding them that they had to focus on building their defense now. He took Karen away and said that he wouldn't let Karen get involved in a fight with Lien about those students. Lien understood his intention and felt grateful. After that, Zhang Yi fully focused on the work of building the facilities needed by Karen. He took out the materials and asked how Karen wanted them. Karen explained that if they didn't care too much about aesthetics, they could strengthen the walls in 3 days. Zhang Yi replied that it wasn't a problem, what was important was the defensive strength, not the appearance. Then, he asked if Karen needed help with anything. Karen stretched her body and said that it was no problem, even if she was a bit slower, the quality would still be maintained, so Zhang Yi didn't have to worry. Zhang Yi then went to Xin Xin's room and knocked on the door. Xin Xin was delighted to see him. Zhang Yi told her that the last time they went out with Karen, they found something interesting. After chatting for a bit, he explained that on their trip, they encountered people from the Sheng base and killed them. He told Xin Xin that, contrary to what they thought, the enemy was still lurking and might attack them at any time. However, Zhang Yi emphasized that he wasn't afraid of them, and it wasn't a big deal. Xin Xin agreed with Zhang Yi and said that, unlike the Sheng base, people coming from such a distance wouldn't have the equipment and missiles to attack them here. Based on his deduction, he asked if they could take this opportunity to drive the students away from the village. Zhang Yi replied that this would be their accident, they couldn't predict or do anything to prevent it. He took the yawl blocking device from his portal and installed it. He said that this would be troublesome, but it would be very useful. Lian's presence in the group was crucial. Zhang Yi handed Xin Xin the satellite phone he took from one of the soldiers and said that it was from the enemy base. Xin Xin could try to use it to gather information. Xin Xin was confident that it would be easy, and if the phone worked, he could handle it. Meanwhile, we were taken to see the Yangqing district. In the middle of a factory, 2 people were tied with chains and being interrogated by soldiers. The soldiers reported to their leader that 5 people tried to escape, 2 were caught alive, while 3 others died. The 2 captured individuals looked confused, either due to fear for their lives or being impressed by the beauty in front of them. A woman then asked why they deserved to live. The 2 men admitted that it was a spontaneous action and begged for forgiveness. The woman asked where they would go if they succeeded in escaping from here. The 2 men were frightened and didn't know what to answer. The woman then asked if they planned to go to the snow worship sect and join those hypocrites. The 2 men begged for forgiveness again, bowing their heads to the ground. The woman then asked for her assistant's opinion. The bespectacled man said that they now had miniaturized explosives, and this was the perfect time to test them. They could install them on these 2 individuals, and if they tried to escape again, they would explode. The woman asked to see the results of the experiment. She put a collar on one of the men and asked how far the collar could function. The soldier present explained that the collar could work up to 5 kilometers from the controller. The woman gave the 2 men a second chance, and now they wore the collars. If they wanted to try, they could run. The 2 men now hoped that the collar wouldn't work, and maybe if they ran fast enough, they could reach 5 kilometers before the woman pressed the button. Xiao Honglian waited for 10 minutes before finally pressing the button. Her assistant asked via radio about the experiment's results. He told her that one of the men exploded, while the other failed because the explosive didn't work. The woman's name was Xiao Honglian, and she revealed that she always kept her promises. Since the man managed to escape, she hoped he was lucky and could find the snow worship sect's territory to save himself. Before leaving the location, Xiao Honglian said that due to the failure of this new equipment, the technical sector would be halted for 3 days. Her assistant tried to convince her, saying that their technical team was just as competent as the team at the Sisson base. They should be given another chance to continue their work. The assistant argued that since the start of the snow disaster, they had only chosen talent from famous universities in the area. Xiao Honglian merely said that if those Buddhas wanted to escape, there was no need to bother hindering them. She said that the hypocritical women of the snow worship sect only used everyone as bait. Her assistant said that they had to take some of the Sisson base's territory to overcome their current resource difficulties. Xiao Honglian agreed, they had to secure their territory before taking territory from other bases. She told her assistant to act cautiously, giving orders to the intelligence personnel to avoid danger by sending them to other areas. She then asked how many troops had returned from that area. Her assistant replied that all the exploration troops had returned, except for 1 troop that went to the farthest area and still hadn't returned or given any news. Xiao Honglian was curious, thinking about the possibility of an ambush by other military forces. Her assistant replied that in the current situation, enemy bases didn't dare to engage in war, so it was unlikely they would attack their group. He assured her that no military base wanted to get involved in a large-scale conflict with another base while the snowy world still posed a significant threat. Her assistant then told her that it was possible that a small faction in that area had attacked their exploration group. However, unless they had found extremely valuable resources, it was unlikely that another base had violated the agreement and attacked their group. Xiao Honglian wondered what kind of resource could be so important that it would trigger a large-scale conflict. She revealed that she felt more at ease with the presence of rival factions than with the snow worship sect. As they spoke, one of the soldiers rushed out and informed them that they had found traces of one of the missing teams. The woman felt anxious upon hearing the news. She said that although Captain Gowon might be arrogant, he wouldn't dare cut off communication and flee from the base with several vehicles. Xiao Honglian then asked if there was a way to track her satellite phone to the location where the signal was lost. However, they couldn't track it because the signal had completely disappeared from the radar. This made Xiao Honglian think that the people who had attacked their group were highly organized. She felt afraid that this wasn't an impulsive act but had been planned beforehand. Attacking Gowon's group was a sign of the start of the war. Xiao Honglian began to think whether this attack was done by the Chaoyu base or the Qingpu base, or if it was the doing of survivors from the Shirshan base. Her assistant said that the location of the accident where they went missing was closer to the Chaoyu base. Since they hadn't contacted that base to gather information, he took the radio and contacted their rival base. Xiao Honglian informed them through the phone that her cousin Gowon was missing and asked if they knew anything. The leader of the Chaoyu base warned Xiao Honglian that Gowon had just passed through their area and that there had been no problems. The leader also stated that one of their teams had also gone missing, which was concerning because the missing people were mutants. Therefore, he asked if the disappearance of his people was related to this. Of course, he believed that the Qingpu base wasn't interested in getting involved in conflict, so he didn't think they had done it. Xiao Honglian then asserted that the only possibility was that the snow worship sect was responsible for the attack on their base. The leader replied that if the snow worship sect's followers had indeed done something to his subordinates, they would have to pay a price 10 times greater. Xiao Honglian didn't miss the opportunity and proposed that they work together to retaliate against the attack. As people discussed whether the snow worship sect was truly responsible for the attack, the actual party responsible for the attack was busy building their fortress and strengthening their defenses. Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi said that these weapons would be connected to mechanical controllers and linked to their computer. They could be controlled remotely and would be very efficient, thanks to Karen's work in automating the weapons. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi mentioned that the Chaoyu base and the Yangqing base hadn't shown any movement in the past few days. He hadn't even seen their tracks in the area. The whole family then gathered to eat. After the meal, Lien said that he would take the food to his students. Zhang Yi helped gather everything into several bags. Xin then asked Lien if he was okay, wondering if the students had treated him badly or if they weren't happy to receive free food. Xin said that Lien shouldn't sacrifice himself for those people, as they didn't deserve his kindness. She tried to convince Lien that he didn't have any responsibility towards them, all his responsibilities had ended since they left the academy. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi just observed everything from a distance. This time, he was just a spectator as the girls acted on their own. A while later, at the training center, Zhang Yi spoke with Lien about whether he felt any danger around the environment. If there was, they could bring the students here. However, everyone here had to agree for them to come. After hearing this, Lien felt very sad because he knew that Xin and Ken strongly opposed bringing those people here, and he had to respect their opinions. However, Lien began to feel a bit better. Maybe the peaceful times would last long enough, so they didn't actually need to worry. Zhang Yi felt more at ease and prepared to start training gradually. Zhang Yi's strategy began to bear fruit. Lien knew that the girls didn't like his students, but he believed that Zhang Yi was on his side and was trying to help him in his desire to protect his students. Lien prepared to show off his skills. It was time for Zhang Yi to learn the strongest hand-to-hand combat. He began to dominate Zhang Yi in the fight. Every punch he received made Zhang Yi feel strange things he had never imagined before. He said that Lien had changed a lot since coming here. When he lost his attachment to those troublesome people, he would become a truly obedient asset. After a long day, Zhang Yi lay in bed, thinking about what he should do. Zhang Yi planned to turn on the satellite phone so its signal would be tracked by the Yangqing base, and then leave it in the students' village. He could lure the enemy's attention to that location. They would definitely eliminate everyone there. However, he would also draw the base's attention to his hiding place, which was very close. He also thought that maybe the bases wouldn't ever find out that he was the one responsible and wouldn't come to his territory. After considering all possibilities, Zhang Yi decided that he couldn't hope for peace to last forever. He had to take risks and control the situation. Zhang Yi would carry out this bold plan. He handed the satellite phone to the mutant cat. The cat had to take the object secretly to the hidden place in the village. The cat ran to the village to leave the phone there and start Zhang Yi's evil plan. Meanwhile, the leader of the snow worship sect, Yuan Kongya, was speaking. He gathered his followers and held a ritual. He told everyone that snow was white and pure, their bodies and souls belonged to the snow and had become as white as snow. He then asked for absolute loyalty from all who believed and desired the purification of their souls. Someone brought a child and begged for the child to be saved. The supreme leader placed his holy hand, and it shone brightly. The child, who was previously weak and possibly sick, was now healthy again and crying. Everyone cheered that it was a great miracle and blessed the great leader of the snow worship sect. After the ritual was finished, Yuan Kongye felt very tired, and one of his followers suggested that he rest. However, Yuan Kongye refused, saying that they had to continue now. Suddenly, a great vibration occurred, and all his followers fell to the ground. They didn't understand what was happening. A girl who seemed to be his deputy immediately gave orders to protect their leader while the rest had to move together to face the enemy. With a low voice, Yuan Kongye prayed, asking for blessings to protect his followers from the war and suffering that was currently happening outside. Several cars were parked in front of the temple, shooting wildly at the entrance. The snow worship sect followers immediately ran, armed, and began fighting the attackers. Many started to fall, some fanatic followers even attached explosives to their bodies and ran towards the enemy to blow themselves up. Xiao Honglian, the leader, growled at them. Thanks to their brainwashing, they no longer feared death. Xiao Honglian then yelled that today she would eradicate this heretic sect. On the enemy side, the priests had entered the battlefield while their troops were firing their guns in panic. The holy mutants used their powers and were able to withstand the bullets. The ammunition that hit their magical shields simply fell to the ground without giving any response. The priests questioned why the military bases were violating the peace agreement. This question made Xiao Honglian even angrier. She yelled for their leader to come out. After that, she said that they were the ones who first violated the peace agreement, so they had no right to complain. Xiao Honglian then drank something and spat out flaming fire towards them. One of the snow worship sect priests used his powers to move the cars in front of the fire explosion, successfully blocking the flames. However, the bodies around them turned to ashes, releasing a very pungent smell. The priest said that there must be some misunderstanding. They had always been neutral and never violated the agreement. Xiao Honglian didn't listen and ordered them all to be destroyed. The leader of the Chaoyu base then moved, and a massive explosion occurred in front of everyone. After that, the leader of the Chaoyu base appeared in the fog, and an ice shield formed around him, with rotating ice thorns surrounding him. With his abilities, he was able to move quickly while shooting ice projectiles towards the enemy. Meanwhile, the soldiers were firing their guns. The snow worship sect troops came with close-range weapons in their hands, having no chance at all against these people. However, those people were so crazy and desperate that they used the strategy of turning themselves into weapons and blowing themselves up in the middle of the enemy troops. They were so crazy that even though they were in a desperate position, they still managed to cause massive damage. Seeing this, Xiao Honglian started to feel worried. She then asked the leader of the other base to cooperate and defeat Zhang Yi. The woman then drank from a large bag and activated her purgatory forging transformation. Zhang Yi realized this and was shocked. Before he could react, the leader of the Chaoyu base appeared silently and grabbed his leg. In an instant, Xiao Honglian was by the girl's side and strongly punched her face, causing a massive explosion. This wasn't enough to defeat the girl from the snow worship sect. The new followers of the snow worship sect were shocked to see this happen. They immediately stood in front of the seriously injured girl, protecting her. Xiao Honglian had almost managed to defeat Zhang Yi. Meanwhile, as the battle intensified and dozens of lives were lost, Xiao Honglian yelled at everyone that her cousin and 10 of his important subordinates had been killed. Wing yelled that his loyal general, Wang Ruizhuan, had died in the Shirshan base area. He said that throughout the city of Shanghai, the snow worship sect was the primary suspect in this matter. Therefore, both leaders yelled that Zhang Yi had to give an explanation, or everyone in the sect wouldn't survive until tonight. One of the snow worship sect soldiers felt angry about the situation. He decided to get rid of this arrogant person but failed. Xiao Honglian easily dodged him. Zhang Yi then approached his allies and said that they had nothing to do with this. The snow worship sect had never attacked any group until today. Wing wasn't convinced and emphasized that there was no one else in the city who could be responsible. Moreover, people from the 2 neighboring bases had been attacked and left no traces at all, so this had to be planned, and they were sure it wasn't the Qingpu base. After hearing all the arguments, Zhang Yi asked the 2 mutants if they had never thought that maybe there was another force in Tianhai City responsible for all this. They were the killers they had been searching for. The 2 leaders then wondered if the Shirshan base had been completely destroyed. Was it possible that they were hiding to slowly gather their strength and secretly hide? However, Xiao Honglian doubted this. She wondered that if they were indeed hiding, they would only slowly gather their strength and wouldn't dare to fight against them at the same time. Firmly, she said that even before the Shirshan base was destroyed, that place wouldn't dare to rebel against them. Zhang Yi replied that although the people from the Shirshan base had the courage, it didn't mean there was no other force. What if there was another force emerging now? This possibility caught Xiao Honglian's attention and explained the current situation. The two leaders decided to investigate the area further to confirm the accuracy of the information. Xiao Honglian finally decided to leave for the time being, but she reminded Zhang Yi not to forget about this. Therefore, they decided to part ways. Wing then said that the corpses and the wounded survivors there would be absorbed by their sect. Xiao Honglian agreed that the brainwashing made these people accept the reality that they became fuel for the sect. Wing wondered what the woman would do. He emphasized that if they worked together from now on, they could dominate the entire area that once belonged to the Shirshan base. Xiao Honglian didn't say anything and left just like that. The man acknowledged that the woman was very strong. The Weeding High followers believed that the woman was hiding something from them, but the man felt that it was natural, it wouldn't be easy to trust others. Wing was also worried about the news he had heard some time ago about a person named Zhang who had secretly stored the largest warehouse in the city before the global freeze. Then, Xiao Honglian was in her base, investigating the case with a soldier. Based on the information received, there were 2 places where the survivors lived. Her assistant suggested that they inform Weeding High and ask for help in sending someone, but the woman preferred not to inform them. Although it was unclear how strong the mysterious force was, by destroying the Shirshan base, they must have weakened. If the Shirshan base was indeed destroyed and they weren't as strong as they seemed, then they could take everything for themselves. Their leader told her assistant not to worry about Weeding High, who was just a sly old fox. They then gave orders to their spies to bring information from Zhang Yi's area. Meanwhile, at the Snow Worship Sect base, Ijuan was severely injured from the battle. The soldiers were very worried about the condition of their Snow Supreme leader, but the woman said that there was something more important to be done now. The scene on the battlefield was shocking. Their comrades who were severely injured and still alive were scattered everywhere. The sect followers could help treat the wounded, but in this cruel world, only a few people deserve treatment to continue fighting in future battles. A girl cried because she lost her comrade, but her tears weren't because of sadness, it was because of something else. She said that she gave advice to the man to have the right to meet his creator directly. Only those who died in battle for the sect obtained the right to meet God. The girl finally helped her friend walk away, saying that she couldn't wait to go too. Then, a soldier ordered them to bring the severely wounded to that place. The corpses were placed near a building, and after they left, something strange happened. Tentacles appeared and grasped the bodies, dragging them to a dark place inside the building. The pile of bodies was placed in a corridor and then hung from the ceiling in a cocoon-like state. Everyone was then placed there, and the atmosphere was filled with smoke. Fruits grew rapidly outside. The soldier prayed for their insane sect in the Snow Worship Sect Church. In the Snow Worship Sect Church, the supreme leader performed a purification ritual. The leader called the children. Their parents told them to believe in whatever the leader did. They had to be baptized to become the Snow Worship Sect servants. The baptism of the children was done by placing a hand on their faces and warning them not to be afraid and not to move. With this device, the leader did something with his powers. From now on, they would become obedient slaves. The children wouldn't get sick anymore. Their parents were very happy and thanked the Snow Supreme Leader's deputy. The woman said that from now on, their children would become sweeter and more obedient, they wouldn't cause any more trouble. Their friends were shocked to see the situation. No one wanted to be baptized like their friends. Unfortunately, the parents were the ones in control and wanted their children to be loyal to the snow god. To become obedient and pure, they had to undergo baptism and discard their emotions. The leader seemed delighted to do so and wondered who would be purified next. The mother was overjoyed to see her child's condition. They then thanked the leader for the cleansing they had done and left the place. After working hard, Yuan came to meet his master. The master was worried about his severely injured servant and hurried to heal him. After healing Yen, the Grand Leader asked if the information had been delivered. Yuan recounted everything they had discovered. A very powerful force had emerged and was related to the destruction of the Shirshan base. A mysterious man named Zhang Yi had apparently allied with an external force to attack the Shirshan base. Yuan also mentioned that the man was responsible for stealing the largest warehouse in the city before the global freeze. With a serious gaze, the Grand Leader stated that Zhang Yi's power was extremely high. How could he have withstood the Shirshan base for so long and even caused its destruction? Yuan tried to convince his leader that they had to send a team immediately to test Zhang Yi's strength and see if he was a friend or foe. Finally, the Grand Leader gave Ijuan permission to do as he pleased. He could send someone to test Zhang Yi's strength. Next, Jakir was analyzing the samples taken by Zhang Yi from his enemy soldiers. It was a type of medicine used on the battlefield. Its effectiveness was extremely high. The medicine could significantly enhance a person's bodily functions and also keep them awake for 3 days and 3 nights. However, the medicine only increased the body's energy consumption and accelerated its metabolism. In reality, this was a very dangerous type of medicine that could cause death if not used carefully. Indeed, in this world, nothing was free. Zhang asked Zier if he remembered the type of poison he used on the rats back then. How much of the medicine's effects could damage the body? Zier replied that if a small amount of antibodies were present in the body, it could neutralize the substance, but if it exceeded 5% of the dosage, the body would experience extremely strong side effects. In the current climate, the result would be slow death from poisoning. Zhao didn't know that there were rats in the house. Why did he ask about it? Zhang only replied that the rats had already left the house. Then, we were shown the rats' base. A group of students were warming themselves up by the fire. The useless group began to think that it was better when they were slaves. They had to peddle goods all day, but they didn't feel cold, and there was always delicious yogurt. The only person who seemed to think sensibly was Xiao Tian. He said that if everyone went through the experiment he did, they wouldn't have any problems. Some girls apologized and asked why Guru Lian was angry with them. One of the boys said that now Lian belonged to Zhang Yi. Maybe Guru Lian had exchanged his body for food. Unfortunately for Xiao Tian, he had to listen to his friends talk badly about his ignorant teacher. They stopped talking when they realized that Guru Lian had come to visit them. Lian said that recently, the area hadn't been very safe, so besides searching for food, it was better to hide and be cautious. The students became frightened and asked for permission to leave. They planned to hide in Zhang Yi's house if the situation was that dangerous. Having grown accustomed to these people, Lian didn't respond, only telling them to take care and be cautious. Finally, he treated them as he should. The students ate the food brought by Lian voraciously, as if it was their last meal. Some people approached the village. The only one who noticed was Xiao Tian. However, before he could realize what was happening, someone had grabbed his neck and ordered him to be quiet. Xiao Tian didn't have the strength to break free, but he managed to kick the person, making him retreat. The man felt strange about the strength the child possessed, and before Tian could escape, the man blocked his way. Tian tried to attack to escape, but with just one punch, he was knocked out, and everything inside him was crushed. With that punch, the strongest person in the student group was defeated. Several hours ago, the enemy base group arrived in the area using a vehicle and decided to explore on foot. They then saw the walls of Zhang Yi's fortress. With that, the soldier realized that the people who could build this must be capable of defeating the very powerful Shirshan base. The man with the shining head ordered them to be cautious. This enemy wasn't easy to defeat. They then headed towards the nearest village, which was their destination. After following the satellite radio signal from the missing soldier, they were cautious. The group leader warned his subordinates to be cautious, as there might be powerful individuals in the area. The scouting soldier returned and reported that the village was deserted and unguarded. The group leader was suspicious. Could this be a trap? With the situation like this, they eventually discovered the students' shelter. Lian's order was to bring all of these people with them. Not long after, Zhang Yi, who had devised this evil plan, discovered that the satellite phone signal at the students' residence had changed. Zhang Yi then went to the window to gaze at the neighboring village. He was eager to see the outcome of his plan. A while later, he went to the control room where Xin was. She was watching a movie. When her brother arrived, Zhang Yi greeted the girl and asked if watching movies alone wasn't boring. He came to obtain information about the enemy's satellite signal. Xin said that these people were very cautious, and since the use of satellite phones wasn't frequent, the data obtained was very limited. However, she managed to find out the identity of the person Zhang Yi had killed. His name was Goen, Xiao Hong Lian's cousin, the leader of the Xiangxing base, and also the captain of a team. Zhang Yi was worried that he had unintentionally killed a relative of the Xiangxing base leader. This matter would have significant consequences. Based on the recorded conversations between him and several people from the Xiangxing base, as well as people from other bases, they might have to face a joint attack from the two organizations. Zhang Yi then imagined the worst-case scenario. However, Zhang Yi wasn't afraid of these people. Unless they also possessed military strength capable of using missiles, these people wouldn't become a significant threat. In fact, Zhang Yi hoped to face these people on the battlefield. Only by doing so could they understand that the Shirshan base's location now belonged to Zhang Yi. Xin carefully observed as Zhang Yi spoke. She stated that they had to fight once again so that these people could understand their strength. Xin then took the opportunity to discuss the snow cult. through the intercepted conversations, it seemed that several bases had a very negative attitude towards the snow cult followers. Therefore, Xin was certain that there would be conflict among them. Zhang Yi asked for Xin's advice. Xin said that if they were attacked by the Xiangxing base, they might have to consider the snow cult followers as allies. Zhang Yi stated that unknown allies were more dangerous than the enemy itself. However, he didn't mind using these people and exploiting them. Meanwhile, at the Xiangxing base, the soldiers sent to investigate the satellite signal in the Shirshan base area returned with the stolen phone and several people for interrogation. Xiao Honglian was reading in her office when she was informed that they had returned with the results of their investigation. They found Goiwen's lost mobile phone in Suzhou City and captured a group of students who called themselves the Tian King Academy students, and their teacher was with Zhang Yi. Regarding Zhang Yi, he wasn't seen, but they found a large ice and snow fortress on the other side. The man believed that if his guess was correct, Zhang Yi and his subordinates lived behind the fortress. With this report, Xiao Honglian felt satisfied and wanted to know where the captives were. The man suggested that she immediately interrogate them. There were innocent and naive students from Guru Lian. The students couldn't help but think that this woman was very beautiful. The bald man told her that one of them must have a connection with Shirshan because he found evidence of body modification technology on his body. Xiao Honglian ordered that this person be examined further and then sat down, showing her beautiful legs to those idiots. The woman then ordered them to reveal everything they knew. Of course, the most arrogant student among them shouted that he would tell them everything they wanted to know, he just wanted to live. His attitude made everyone say the same thing, both about Zhang Yi and their teacher, Lian. They revealed everything. The first question was how they obtained the phone. They knew nothing about it. They said they had never seen it before. This answer displeased the woman. She then asked how many people were under Zhang Yi's command and what abilities each of them possessed. He had many weapons and resources. Xiao Honglian wanted many answers, but these students didn't know anything. What they knew was that Zhang Yi had some spatial-related powers, and the people with him were very strong. The woman's assistant said that this information wasn't helpful for estimating how strong Zhang Yi's team was. The woman then asked if they still had any other information. They had to think carefully, as so far, their information wasn't enough to save there. After those wise words, his loyal assistant emphasized that not all women in this world were as rational as she was. Perhaps Guru Lian had a soft heart. Furthermore, his assistant's argument was quite strong. The fact that they could live close to Zhang Yi's shelter meant that Lian still cared about them. Xiao Honglian wondered if this woman named Lian was foolish. However, she decided to accept this plan. She ordered someone to contact Zhang Yi, put a collar on the students' necks, and throw them into the basement. The next day, Lian reported that she would visit the village where her students were. Zhang Yi only reminded her not to forget to stay warm outside. Of course, Zhang Yi already knew the fate of the people protected by Lian and wondered how she would react later. The only certainty Zhang Yi had was that with Lian's personality, she wouldn't be as ruthless as he was. What he hoped for was that Lian wouldn't cause any trouble. If she did, he would have to ask her to leave the shelter. The most innocent and naive woman in this story, Lian, was going through her routine, bringing food to her undeserving students. Lian didn't find any signs that anyone was in the village. She wondered if they had been kidnapped by a powerful force. There wasn't a single person in sight. They had truly been taken away. Lian could only ask Zhang Yi for help. She felt that this wasn't a coincidence. If someone had indeed attacked them, the target must have been herself. Her heart told her that she couldn't let them die because of her being elsewhere. Zhang Yi was playing with his phone when he found out something had happened. Lian told him that her students were missing. Xin pretended to be innocent, very shocked to hear the news. She told Zhang Yi that she suspected the groups around them had already reached the area. Zhang Yi knew this was very possible, but it was hard to understand why they took the students away without leaving any signs. Zhang Yi wondered if Lian actually had an enemy who wanted to harm her. However, the woman had never had any enemies. Zhang Yi told her not to worry, as they would find a solution together. They had to investigate whether someone had approached the shelter first to see if there were any clues. For that, Zhang Yi could check the camera recordings, as they monitored the entire area around the house with surveillance cameras. There were no signs of the enemy. If there were no signs of the enemy, what needed to be done was to wait for their reaction. Zhang Yi recalled that although it was currently known that Tianhai City still had 4 large bases, there was still a possibility of actions from unknown small forces. For them to take active action was almost impossible. However, if the kidnappers had taken Lian's students, they must have had a certain plan. All they could do was wait. Lian understood this, but she didn't comprehend what she possessed that made others interested in her. Zhang Yi suggested that they only wanted her because she was very strong, and this made the woman even sadder, as she felt guilty for the loss of her students. Zhang Yi immediately grasped Lian's hand and comforted her, saying that the problem was his problem as well. As soon as they received more information, he would take action. With that, Lian felt slightly more respectful towards him. In the end, her students would still be with her. In front of his two girls, Zhang Yi confirmed that they were indeed in danger of being attacked. However, he reminded them that peace in the post-apocalyptic world was temporary, war and battles were normal. Zhang Yi said that if two forces attacked them, they could win, but if all the other forces united against them, that was a different story. Zhao Qi'er then asked if he didn't have any pity for Lian. This question confused Zhang Yi. Zhao Qi'er then wanted to know if he wasn't interested in Lian. Zhang Yi said that he needed Lian very much, and it would be great if they could become reliable friends. However, before that, Lian had to pass this test. Moreover, he informed Uncle Yu and Chunlei about the situation. His two aunts had already predicted that after they killed those people, it was only a matter of time until retaliation came. Zhang Yi emphasized that every time they tried to dominate a place, only when all threats around them were eliminated could they feel safe. Zhang Yi said that not everyone could escape from feelings like theirs, but they didn't need to worry. Once those people realized their strength, they would naturally not try to attack his shelter. Uncle Yu didn't mind having to fight again, only Chunlei felt that every time they had to fight, he had less time for his imaginary wives. Suddenly, they were startled by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Everyone ran to the second floor, and from there, they could see only one vehicle approaching. Zhang Yi observed with a sniper rifle in his hand. A car with several people inside approached his house and released an arrow that stuck in the wall with a note tied to the end of it. After that, they left. Of course, Zhang Yi wouldn't let this happen so easily. He shot the car's tires, causing it to flip over. Not long after, he chased the car's occupants. Zhang Yi jumped from the second floor of his house and landed lightly, like a feather. The soldier who came to deliver the message was very arrogant because they were seen trying to escape from the overturned car. Zhang Yi approached, riding his large cat. One of the soldiers tried to help his friend, but soon gave up and tried to escape alone. With a precise shot, the soldier's leg was hit, and he fell. The situation was under control. The attackers did something that Zhang Yi couldn't predict. They bit the capsules hidden in their teeth to prevent information from leaking if they were caught. In other words, they preferred to die rather than reveal information. Zhang Yi didn't know their purpose here, but Chun caught the arrow they shot at the wall. Zhang Yi ordered Chun to stop immediately because there was a risk that the arrow was poisonous. To be sure, Zhang Yi told Chun to carefully release the arrow, and then Zhang Yi stored the arrow in his dimensional space. All objects he brought to the alternate space could be observed perfectly, making his ability one of the strongest in the world. Because he wasn't sure if it was safe, Zhang Yi ordered Chun to remove his glove and put on a new one. Later, in Zhaokir's laboratory, Zhang Yi brought another strange sample for analysis. He could see that it was a piece of paper with a note, but Zhaokir had to analyze whether there was poison in the ink on the paper. Uncle Yu agreed that there was no such thing as excessive caution. Zhaokir then accepted their advice and performed a chemical analysis. After examining the arrow, it turned out to be poisonous. If Chunlei had touched the tip of the arrow, he would likely be buried by now. Now, Zhaokir fully understood the danger in small things. He also said that there was something written on the paper that they could see through the glass. It was a virtual address. Xin recognized it. Through that address, they could contact the Xiangxing headquarters. Xin asked Zhang Yi if he could contact them now. Zhang Yi said that he fully trusted Xin's abilities. If she said there was no danger, he believed her. Lian felt excited because these were the people responsible for her student's disappearance. Before proceeding, Zhang Yi warned Lian that this might be true, but she had to remember that negotiating with enemies wasn't simple. If they showed weakness, they would definitely be attacked. Therefore, Lian could only observe and not show interest in her students. If the enemy knew the people they kidnapped were valuable, they would be in a stronger position. Although her heart was soft, Lian understood the logic. Everyone gathered in the living room, and Xin initiated the call. On the other end, a woman confirmed that she was speaking with Zhang Yi, the leader of the surrounding area of Zhou village and the fortified residence. The woman introduced herself as Xiao Honglian, the leader of the Yanqing district shelter. Without hesitation, Honglian asked about the team she had sent to the factory some time ago, which was annihilated by Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi's response remained calm, as if the action was fully justified. Upon realizing the attack on her subordinates, Honglian's anger erupted. She emphasized that in Shanghai, no one dared challenge her power, and the Yanqing shelter's fate was sealed. Zhang Yi remained calm, mentioning that the last person to try and threaten him, Cheninyan, the former leader of the Baseation base, had been destroyed by him. Hong Lian disputed this claim, considering that the Baseation base was destroyed by a missile attack, not by Zhang Yi. She regarded this claim as mere arrogance. Zhang Yi then turned the question around, inquiring about the real reason behind the missile attack on the Baseation base. The conversation turned into a display of strength, with Zhang Yi warning that if Hong Lian realized her position and retreated from his territory, the Yanqing shelter might still survive. However, if not, her group would suffer the same fate as the others. Zhang Yi also demanded that the captives be handed over immediately, without resistance, emphasizing that this humiliation would not be forgotten. Zhang Yi's confidence enraged Hong Lian further. She threatened to send the captives' body parts as a warning. However, this threat did not shake Zhang Yi. Hong Lian realized her slight advantage in the situation and asked if the captives were important enough to Zhang Yi or if he could eliminate them on the spot. Zhang Yi, due to Lian's presence beside him, finally showed concern and was willing to negotiate. Hong Lian felt more confident after hearing Zhang Yi's attitude and decided to consider her next move. Xiao Hong Lian accused Zhang Yi of killing her cousin and his troops. Now she had important people in her hands and planned to exchange them for Zhang Yi's resources, specifically the spoils from the warehouse in the city before the ice disaster. Hong Lian demanded half of all Zhang Yi's resources as compensation, in exchange for which her students would be returned. However, Zhang Yi rejected this demand outright, considering it impossible to accept. In response to the rejection, Hong Lian stated that the only option left was war. She also reminded Zhang Yi that he had killed someone from the Kaio base and questioned whether he was capable of facing the simultaneous attack of two major bases. This threat did not shake Zhang Yi, who confidently asserted that Hong Lian clearly did not understand the extent of his power. If war was her choice, then he would destroy anyone who dared challenge him. Zhang Yi's loyal followers witnessed their leader's unwavering determination. Zhang Yi emphasized that the students were his, and Hong Lian only needed to surrender them. However, Hong Lian stubbornly stated that the more Zhang Yi forced her, the less likely she was to release the students. She even threatened to make them suffer and beg for mercy. This threat worried Lian, but Zhang Yi inwardly hoped the threat would soon be carried out, as it was difficult for him to maintain his calm demeanor. When the call ended, Zhang Yi pretended to be frustrated with the negotiation results. He declared to everyone that there was no more room for passivity, and they had to act immediately. Zhang Yi ordered his strongest soldiers to prepare, emphasizing that this situation was different from the incident with the Baseation base. Their current location was not advantageous if attacked, and risking everyone's safety was not a wise choice. However, Zhang Yi's desire to face Hong Lian alone was so strong that his followers tried to calm him down. Even Chun warned that if Zhang Yi continued to force his attitude, it would cause problems. Zhang Yi finally controlled his emotions, although still visibly annoyed. Everyone knew that he only wanted to save the students, especially for Lian's sake. Realizing Zhang Yi's efforts, Lian tried to calm him down and promised not to involve anyone else in his personal affairs. He decided to handle the problem alone. On the other side, Zhao Qi'er felt worried that Lian would indeed act alone. Zhang Yi failed to convince Lian. Chun Lei realized that Zhang Yi's acting was excellent but felt overly dramatic. Everyone knew that such brave words didn't suit Zhang Yi's true nature, which preferred not to fight if the chances of winning were slim. Nevertheless, at least Zhang Yi tried to show his support for Lian. Uncle Zhang Yi felt that the situation wasn't his fault, among them. Zhang Yi's team understood their leader's true intentions, despite his seemingly selfish actions. They remained united because each member had unique skills and relied on one another for survival. Karen was deeply worried, knowing Lian wouldn't agree with this. Zhang Yi ordered the two women to try and convince Lian not to take rash actions. Lian was in his room, holding his sword, ready for the final battle. Xin Xin and Ken went to his room to persuade him. Xin Xin questioned Lian's decision to go to the battlefield, leaving them alone and unprotected. They were also his students and needed his protection, especially since they lacked inner strength. Lian was torn between saving the selfish people and couldn't hold back his tears. Xin Xin begged Lian not to rush into decisions, as there was still a chance to negotiate with the Yanqing base. With a soft heart, Lian eventually agreed to wait longer. After leaving the room, Ken asked Xin Xin what made Lian so dear to Zhang Yi or herself. Xin Xin replied that she was only deceiving Lian. People like Lian didn't know how to manage their emotions and often became confused. Determined to make Lian stay, Xin Xin believed that having Lian around would benefit them. Zhang Yi wasn't someone who cared for lazy people, so they had to strive to help Zhang Yi's success. Xin Xin and Karen successfully convinced Lian to stay and immediately informed Zhang Yi. He felt pleased upon hearing the news, as the effects of the medicine he had administered should soon take effect on the students. Meanwhile, at the Yanqing base, Xiao Honglian learned from one of Lian's students that Zhang Yi had several powerful followers. Honglian realized that if she could recruit them, Yanqing's strength would increase significantly. Her assistant agreed that, given the current situation, it was only a matter of time before they succeeded in infiltrating Zhang Yi's ranks. They had to eliminate Zhang Yi's influence over his followers. Honglian planned to seize Zhang Yi's power and resources without needing to engage in battle. Aware that they were taking a risk, as other bases were always on alert, her assistant argued that attacking Zhang Yi's fortress was a worthwhile move. Honglian, however, felt it was better to do nothing than to make a mistake. She ordered a video recording as a threat to Zhang Yi. A strange occurrence took place when the followers began vomiting and feeling dizzy simultaneously. Her assistant contacted the female leader to report the situation and ask if there was any possibility of saving them. Honglian soon realized that this was a symptom of poisoning, but she was perplexed about how they could have been poisoned in this location. Unfortunately, the doctor informed her that they had been poisoned with low doses over a long period, and there was no hope for survival. The assistant was shocked and began to realize what was truly happening. He suspected that the poisoner was Zhang Yi himself, and they had been trapped by Zhang Yi's tactics. Honglian was bewildered, thinking that Zhang Yi indeed wanted to eliminate the students without dirtying his own hands. Xiao Honglian ordered a video recording of the still-living students as leverage. Although they had been poisoned, if the poisoning wasn't Zhang Yi's fault, the video could still be used as a bargaining tool. Some time later, Xin received contact from the Yanqing base. Honglian's assistant wanted to know if Zhang Yi was willing to exchange the students for food, 1 ton of food for each student. Zhang Yi watched the video of the students' torment, but he wasn't convinced that they were still alive. If they could show the students in a living state, he might agree. However, Zhang Yi felt no need to prove anything. He firmly stated that if he couldn't see them, he wouldn't exchange a single grain of rice for their cold corpses. In truth, Zhang Yi didn't want to see them at all, so he decided to hang up the phone. On the other side, Zhang Yi was certain that all the students were dead. Xin was curious about how her brother could do such a thing, and Zhang Yi explained that his secret was the new medicine he had obtained and put in their food. Xin was asked not to tell anyone about this and to focus on boosting Lian's morale when he found out that everyone had been poisoned. Xin felt relieved because she no longer had to meet them at the Yanqing base. Honglian's assistant reported that everyone had died, and Zhang Yi rejected their offer. The only option left was war. 2 days later, Zhang Yi received a video from the Yanqing base, showing the aftermath of their actions. In the video, the consequences were clear. Xiao Honglian emphasized that this was a fitting retaliation, marking. In Zhang Yi's eyes, those people held no value, and that didn't hinder him at all. However, Xin was still a young girl. Although she appeared mature, her heart hadn't been corrupted like Zhang Yi's. Zhang Yi reassured Xin that she didn't need to worry, he wouldn't let her die because he himself wouldn't die. The young girl had a very strong mind, and despite her body being tied to a chair, she became even more determined not to be a burden to her brother. She vowed to become extremely useful to Zhang Yi. After comforting the girl, Zhang Yi told them that they needed to prepare Lian for the bad news. Xin had to mentally prepare Lian and give him medicine to calm his mind. Then, Zhang Yi gathered everyone to show them the response from the Yanqing base. Lian felt anxious, hoping this might be a new offer to save his students. Whatever it was, he would try to take them back. However, when they turned on the TV, Lian was shocked by what he saw. The scene broke his heart. Zhao Qier and Yang were more surprised by Lian's reaction than by Zhang Yi's. Lian fainted, and Zhang Yi explained that he had given him a sedative. He had anticipated this, so now Lian just needed to rest. Although there was no direct connection with those people, everyone felt sad, knowing Lian was a very dedicated teacher. This situation was a huge blow to him. Zhang Yi helped carry the woman to her room. The 2 girls were asked to take care of Lian and help calm the negative feelings in his heart. Zhang Yi asked Zhao Qier to give Lian sedatives to keep him in bed for a few days. Everyone had to realize that the battle with the Yanqing base was unavoidable. Maybe the Koyu base would also join in. Facing attacks from 2 major bases wouldn't be easy, they had to be ready to act according to their training. In the midst of tension between the military bases, the Snow sect finally took a step. A woman far away used her mysterious powers. This woman was able to see a person's energy from afar, and what she saw shook her thoughts. The energy of someone there was the strongest she had ever seen in her life. There shouldn't be anyone like that in the entire city. This old woman had the ability to see a person's energy and awaken their dormant mutant powers. She had to return immediately to warn the female priest about what she had discovered. This man was far stronger than anyone could imagine. At the Yanqing base's headquarters, someone introduced himself and claimed to know Zhang Yi, having worked for him in the past. At that time, Zhang Yi had ordered the construction of a fortress for his company, and this person was involved in the construction process, knowing how it was made. This person was Zhang Yi's first employee. Although not close to Zhang Yi, his knowledge was invaluable. Now, as a servant of Mar Zancheng, he was willing to help attack Zhang Yi's headquarters. Hong Lian then gave the leadership position to this man. They believed Zhang Yi's headquarters was an armed apartment complex he had once used. The man claimed that with the right equipment, he knew where and how to cut through the walls of Zhang Yi's base to launch a surprise attack. This was good news, but there was something unclear to Hong Lian. If the base could be breached with the right materials, why couldn't the Beisishan base do it, or even destroy Zhang Yi's fortress? The woman was clever and suspected that Zhang Yi's strongest defense wasn't his base, but his own strength. Maybe he and his subordinates were so strong that Mar Shan couldn't defeat them and were counterattacked by Zhang Yi, resulting in their loss. As a precaution, Hong Lian decided not to try to rob him alone and asked for help from a rival base. She contacted Weeding and explained that Zhang Yi wasn't a simple man. If he managed to withstand the attack from the Shan base, they couldn't face him alone. Hong Lian proposed that they join forces to defeat him. Wing Hai was confident in his strength and asked if he and Hong Lian alone wouldn't be enough to destroy Zhang Yi. The woman argued that it wasn't a problem, but they shouldn't take the risk. Hong Lian emphasized that if they worked together, they could even get help from the Qingpu base to share the risk, which would benefit all parties. Wei Dinghai understood and admired Hong Lian's cautiousness, and he agreed to follow her ideas. However, the man only wanted priority in obtaining fuel for his troops. Now, we are taken to the Qingpu base, a power in the industrial district. Their leader and employees were factory workers. The leader preferred spending his time feeding his pets, throwing a piece of bread, and watching them fight for food. Someone came to inform him that the woman leading the Zancheng base was trying to contact him. Although he didn't like getting involved with others, the man decided to listen to what Hong Lian wanted. At the Qingpu base, the leader's daughter was protected by a giant mutant beast. The little girl was cheerful and innocent. Despite being a ruthless leader in his territory, he was also a caring father. He always reminded his daughter to wear her clothes and scarf when playing in the snow. In his office, his subordinates had been waiting for hours until their leader arrived. The man finally asked what Hong Lian wanted to discuss. The woman got straight to the point and told him that the Shan base had been destroyed. Although this information wasn't new to Qingpu, due to their distant territory, they couldn't get involved. The man also said that the Shan territory was too vast, and they could start discussing how to divide it. Hong Lian explained that this wasn't as simple as it seemed. She explained that the Shan territory was controlled by a very powerful group. This group had already killed soldiers from the Hong Lian and Winghai bases. Although their numbers were small, each member of this group was a mutant, and they had a safer shelter than a military fortress. Even the Shan base didn't have a chance against them. The man began to realize the danger. He realized that they couldn't carelessly attack, as a long journey to fight in a foreign territory could result in losing a third of their troops before the battle even began. This was in line with Hong Lian's goal of having them work together against the powerful individual. The Koyu and Yanqing bases had agreed to act together. Once Qingpu agreed, they would launch a simultaneous attack. After the three military bases agreed, the Snow sect would join in. The four major powers would unite to defeat the group and then divide the Shan and Zuejian territories together. The man couldn't refuse to join and miss out on a share of the profits. He then asked what would happen if they all couldn't breach Zhang Yi's defenses. Hong Lian revealed that her former employee was the owner of the company that built Zhang Yi's fortress, and they knew how to breach the defenses. Although it had many benefits, Qingpu still needed to consider this. Hong Lian waited for his response, emphasizing that this was a valuable investment. Afterward, he hung up the call and sent information about Zhang Yi to the man. Some information in the report made him curious. This wasn't a coincidence. Some time later, the Snow sect showed new developments. The person they sent to gather information about Zhang Yi had returned. The old woman said that she was very loyal to the sect and asked them to trust her words. The mysterious individual had strength comparable to a great sect leader. It was even possible that they were a heavenly hand. The situation had changed for them. If this person was indeed a heavenly hand, the other bases had underestimated Zhang Yi. They believed that even if they united with other bases, they wouldn't be able to capture him. In this case, they had to join forces with Zhang Yi. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi received a message from someone claiming to be his former classmate. Zhang Yi recognized the person and asked about their well-being. The person said that they were now the leader of the Qingpu base. However, the man was clumsy in conveying this through text, so he eventually made a phone call. Zhang Yi informed him that the leader of the Kingpo base was named Sing Tian, meaning his friend had changed his name. His friend confirmed that Sing Tian was a more majestic name. Zhang Yi realized this was a good sign for him and then asked why his friend had contacted him now. His friend just wanted to chat and reminisce about the past. Sing Tian wasn't good at studying and wasn't as handsome as Zhang Yi back then. However, who would have thought that he could become so successful? They eventually caught up with each other after years apart. Zhang Yi agreed to talk more later, but for now, there were more pressing matters. His friend informed him that Zhang Yi had killed people from the Zancheng and Koyu bases, and now they were planning to destroy him for security reasons. They wanted Kingpo to join in the attack. If the 4 bases united to attack Zhang Yi, he wouldn't stand a chance. The news of the union of the major powers was the last thing that crossed Zhang Yi's mind. Zhang Yi then asked if the call was also a declaration of war. Sing Tian explained that for now, no one would declare war, they would only launch a surprise attack. The call was just to reminisce about old times. However, Sing Tian said that to stay out of the war, he needed Zhang Yi's help. If Zhang Yi gave him 10 tons of food, he wouldn't join the war. The request made Zhang Yi pause. His friend was really bold to ask for this. Maybe the amount of food seemed enormous for the time being. However, for Zhang Yi, it was just a small portion of what he had taken from the Shan base when he looted it. Zhang Yi decided not to show that he had more than that. He stated that he needed time to think about his friend's request, which asked for too much food in a short time. Afterward, Zhang Yi pondered that 10 tons of food was still less than what he had taken from the Shan base. After thinking longer, he realized that there was a lot of food that wasn't that important to him, which he could donate. However, could he trust his friend? To be more certain, he planned to pay part of the food before the war and the rest after the battle. Zhang Yi was determined to prepare everything well and fight with the hope of gaining peace afterward. He then held a meeting with all his members. The analysis from various sides showed that the situation wasn't as bad as it seemed. The 4 major powers had indeed united, but the truth was that they were more cautious of each other. The groups that were truly determined to go to war were the Zancheng and Koyu bases. Zhang Yi explained that because of the snow, they could only attack from one direction, and that area was the perfect place to launch a counterattack. They would focus their attack power there. Zhang Yi outlined his defense plan and reminded them that their goal wasn't to defeat the enemy but to hold them off. Just making the enemy fear their strength would be enough. After that, Zhang Yi planned to negotiate with the owner of the territory, Chun. Kawada was worried that they would successfully destroy their first line of defense. They might have the resources to try and breach their defenses, and they even had powerful mutants. Zhang Yi said that anything that went beyond their current plan, he would take care of with his own strength. Suddenly, the mutant cat sensed someone approaching. Zhang Yi didn't expect anyone to come at that time. He saw someone walking alone, approaching the base. Zhang Yi decided to check from the top floor using binoculars. Zhang Yi saw an old woman from the snow sect approaching alone. This made him realize that although her appearance seemed. Pamanu was shocked, recognizing the old woman as the one who gave Linjian his powers. However, Zhang Yi didn't know what the snow sect really wanted to discuss with him. Xin thought that if Zhang Yi wanted to ruin the alliance of the 4 major powers, this was the perfect opportunity. The benefits of this meeting would only be known after they made contact. Zhang Yi asked Chunlei to go out and talk to the woman, despite Chunlei feeling scared and stating that he was the weakest among them. Zhang Yi denied this, saying that in a snowy environment like this, Chunlei stood out the most. Moreover, Zhang Yi would ensure his safety. Chunlei eventually went out and followed Zhang Yi's orders, trying to prevent the woman from approaching their defense line. The old woman introduced herself and knew that she wasn't talking to the real Zhang Yi. Pamanu explained that the woman had the ability to see a person's potential power. Zhang Yi thought this ability was incredible. Zhang Yi then ordered Chen to tell the woman that he didn't want to meet her, and whatever she wanted to say, she should tell Chen instead. The woman realized that Zhang Yi was refusing to meet her directly. She said that her visit was under the orders of their leader, and there was important information that needed to be conveyed to Zhang Yi. Within 3 days, the 3 major powers in the city would attack his shelter. The woman casually mentioned that those poor people intended to attack this beautiful place. Chunlei was even shocked to hear the woman's fanatic words. The woman continued, saying that the gods always spread their love throughout the land, and these people had to be stopped. The snow sect would help Zhang Yi. Upon hearing the woman's words, Zhang Yi showed his wicked face, which was exactly what he had planned. In the city of Shanghai, the 4 major powers fought each other without any unity or cooperation. They only cared about their own interests and were willing to betray each other at any time. The more Zhang Yi could split these powers, the higher his chances of destroying them one by one. Through Chen, Zhang Yi asked if the snow sect didn't want to join the attack. The old woman explained that the snow sect's mission was to fight against evil powers and spread love. Working with Zhang Yi would bring more peace. She also said that other factions were afraid of the snow sect's growth, just like Zhang Yi. They were all oppressed by other powers and struggled to survive under pressure. They had to unite to fight against the hegemony of these power-based organizations. Through Chen, Zhang Yi asked for proof of their sincerity if they wanted to cooperate. The woman, who considered Zhang Yi a cautious person, sent something that he would surely like. It was a sacred object made from the soul of ice. Zhang Yi wanted to know what benefits this object had. The old woman explained that the soul of ice had a very simple function. This object could help someone awaken their spiritual essence and become a mutant. For mutants, this object could dig deeper into their potential, making them stronger. The woman claimed that for Zhang Yi, the concept of power enhancement wasn't unfamiliar. Zhang Yi wasn't too convinced by the words of this unknown woman and sarcastically asked her to reveal the truth. However, the woman persisted, saying that the soul of ice was a sacred object without side effects. The 4 major bases had already used this object, and this was how the Snow Sect gained recognition from the other bases. If this was true, then Zhang Yi was facing an extraordinary opportunity. Zhang Yi asked Xin Xin to check the documents from the Shirshan base. Did they have any records of this? Xin Xin confirmed that in the documents, it was mentioned that the Shirshan base produced mutants using mysterious energy. According to their reports, this created cells to replicate mutants on a large scale. Xin Xin also added that according to the records, the 4 major bases asked for the soul of ice to create these mutant cells. These cells didn't contain any danger, they weren't toxic substances and couldn't be manipulated or implanted in a carrier. With that, it seemed that there was indeed something like what the old woman said, and if this was true, it would be a great opportunity. Zhang Yi asked Chun to ask if ordinary people could use this object. Zhang Yi felt skeptical that something this good existed. The old woman explained that the effects of the object depended on the potential of the person using it. Therefore, the woman suggested using the object on unknown or ordinary people. Chun asked if the Snow Sect wasn't worried that Zhang Yi would refuse their cooperation despite receiving the object. The Snow Sect knew that the combined forces would come to attack. Although they couldn't cooperate to make Zhang Yi stronger and eliminate more members from the other forces, it would still benefit the Snow Sect. The woman informed them that the Snow Sect would pretend to attack together with the other. Zhang Yi asked what the Snow Sect wanted from him. The woman stated that they only wanted the right to spread the teachings of the Snow Sect in Zhang Yi's territory. This goal seemed unreasonable to Zhang Yi, but if that's what they asked for as compensation, he was willing to accept it. After the agreement was reached, Zhang Yi was now confident in Qingpu's neutrality, and the Snow Sect would become an ally. This situation became more interesting to him. Chun approached the door and asked if it was safe to bring the object inside. Zhang Yi absorbed the box into his personal dimensional space. He could assess what was inside the box. It wasn't a dangerous object. Taking more risks than usual, he decided to evaluate the object directly. When the box was opened, ice-like spheres appeared. Zhang Yi still felt skeptical and reluctant to believe that this object could unlock special powers in someone. However, if this object had the same effect as it did on Linjian, he couldn't ignore it. Unlike Linjian, Zhang Yi didn't intend to use this object to help others but for his own benefit. He wanted to see if the object's effects would be the same for him. Zhang Yi's thoughts were filled with anticipation as he reached for one of the ice-like spheres.